Hi, this is Tammy with TLD Design Center and Gallery of Westmont and Berwyn, Illinois. www.tlddesigns.com is my website. I wanted to offer a little series in front to back loom dressing hacks for various looms that people might be purchasing. I've been weaving since 1984, so definitely over 30 years. And I have had the opportunity to try out through my studios various different loom designs, loom makers. Today the loom I am focused on is the LeClerc or LeClerc, however you feel it's appropriate to refer to it. This is their Artisat loom model. And the feature, well, you know whether you have an Artisat, is unfortunately not by the label, as Nihilus LeClerc is actually the name of the company at the time this loom was manufactured. And so some people confuse that this loom is called a Nihilus loom, but indeed it is not the Nihilus model. This is the Artisat. It is a 36-inch width. This particular one is a 4 shaft. It is very standard for this loom to not have a board across the top. That was sold as an accessory item, so it is not in any way indicative of a less stable loom. The other way you can tell whether you have an Artisat is it has a folding nature to it. And there is in this case, a metal bar that appears on each side. And when that is released, it allows for this whole front section to be lifted and kind of collapsed against the castle. Certainly it has the collapsible warp beam set up. By lifting up those brackets, you can bring the beam all the way up against the castle in the back of the loom. But I am going to show you a little hack that I have developed for front to back loom dressing, which is my preferred method of dressing looms and teaching people how to set up a loom from the first time. I have put some tweaks on it. I did not invent front to back loom dressing, and in fact, I only knew about it due to a individual in my college weaving class starting front to back loom dressing, whereas my professor, Dr. Shazman was her name, actually taught us all how to do back to front loom dressing. So I am very well comfortable with either approaches to setting up the loom, but my preference over all of these years is the front to back loom method. So I'm not going to talk about the arguments about which is better or why. I just merely want to offer a video for Artisat loom owners who are interested in the front to back dressing method. So my first hack is that the reed was slayed off of the loom flat on a table. And now it is time to mount it on the loom. So the first hack that I offer is this white board that the reed is sitting on. I don't know if I'm going to fumble the camera. It's a heavy board in an attempt to put it into place, but so this is merely a laminated, it could be a cabinet door from IKEA is my favorite place to find them. Certainly any kind of, I suggest smooth laminated board for this. And that will serve to support the warp. As you can see, it looks a little bit messy, but all I have to do is flip the warp chain. I do chain my warps, and then you'll see all of my slip knot bundles. I do suggest a slip knot when you're slaying your reed. It is easier than an overhand knot when you are behind the loom threading. So I've cleared this bottom rail, and I'm simply, I've positioned the board so that it's not interfering with my groove on the bottom of the beater. I'm just going to slide it forward, line it up with the groove, tip it. All of those knots fell in nicely, and again, something a little challenging to do with one hand. Well, I can clamp that down later. Sometimes if you get your beater bar at too much of an angle, then it doesn't slide down into place as easily, and it probably requires two hands to do it. So now I'm set up in the front. I'm just going to tuck that board even closer. I do prefer white boards, unless of course you are working with a all white warp. White board provides some contrast for when we're behind the loom doing the threading. As you can see, I have lease sticks, L-E-A-S-E. I've always heard them pronounced leash. So once again, I am not one to get bogged down in terminology. You don't exactly have to know the terminology in order to be a beautiful weaver, but understand leash sticks are generally provided with every loom, brand new loom that I sell. And so we know that leash sticks play an important part in preserving the cross as a part of our ease of threading our looms. And so that said, my leash sticks are nicely supported by this board. No need to tie it or swag it on the loom. Yes, when I was taught back to front loom dressing, I was taught that leash sticks would be in fact behind the castle, which is the midsection of this loom, and that's the catchment, and they would be swagged. You would tie a string from the back beam and passing through your leash sticks and then secured to the castle in some way, shape, or form. But in front to back, they are going to in fact be in front of the reed, in the front of the loom. So here's my 4 shafts. So again, the focus is on the fact that this is a LeClerc Artisat loom. It does not have a removable back beam. Certainly you can unscrew those, but I do have a concern that frequent screwing and unscrewing of those just to take the beam off might end up causing it to get loose and not do the job of holding. As you can see, my apron, my warp beam apron rod, is a rod with string. Initially, when you have an older LeClerc loom, and even still today, you will find a canvas apron on these looms. But this one is older, and in the process of cleaning and refurbishing looms, I scared the cat. I have been using a string system instead of the so I'm just going to wrap this. Sorry if this is making you woozy. Just wrap it around that warp beam a little bit. Okay, so how then am I going to thread my heddles on this loom for convenience? So what the first thing I will do is just simply disconnect. Let me get behind this loom a little bit better. I am going to simply disconnect the brake release cord, and then I have already released my side bracket on the opposite side. I am going to lower this beam to the floor, and I think I put my stool slightly in the wrong place. Now the problem is that other one is acting like a kickstand, so I'm gonna just swing it a little bit, get some momentum, and now it's flat. And this one will be flat. So now the beam is completely resting on the floor. So I like to be eye level with the heddles. This is my favorite thing to sit on, just a simple stool. If my weaving students, when I have them here in person weaving, have knee or hip issues, I invite them to be like Goldilocks and try out all the chairs. I absolutely have had a typical task chair with wheels. able to fit on the floor in the space here. The key concern, of course, is not tripping over the loom or applying pressure on your warp beam, which might damage it. So now I am completely eye level, just like you are eye level with what it is I'm going to be threading in my heddles. And I do all of my heddle threading by hand. You can see this loom has wire heddles. Now, on the food chain of heddles, typically you'll hear people poo-pooing the wire heddles. And the reason for that, it's not invalid certainly, is that it has a sharper top and bottom to it. But I assure you, I have all these years worked on looms that are outfitted with wire heddles, and I have not seen them to be the cause of issues with stress or fraying of my thread. And I work with metallic threads, superfine metallic threads as an individual warp thread, not supported by any other thread, and have never, ever had an issue with wire heddles slicing my thread. So from here, you can see, I can see through, because of the contrast of that board, I can see nicely through even my black threads. I would smooth out the threads that are laying over the leash sticks, but I am even able to discern which thread is crossing in the leash sticks when it comes time to thread my heddles. When I thread my heddles, I'm careful not to pull any more thread towards me than I have in front of me right now, which is, I would say that it is maybe 18 inches. Yes, I would say that I have about 18 inches. Anything more than that is unnecessary, and it's not going to be a failed project. It's just you're making life, in all cases, I qualify them as making your life harder or making your life easier, not necessarily, failed. And so I would be moving my heddles into position for threading. I like to suggest to my students to come up with a regular routine of how many threads how many repeats or how many threads, and double check your threading as you go, because you are more willing to fix. It is certainly easier to pull back a series of 12 threads to correct a threading mistake than the sad reality of it after the fact. And so I've threaded 2 here. I'm not going to take up any more time. As I would thread a pattern and double check my pattern, I would tie it in a slip knot so that I would be looking at a whole series of organized threads. I always take care to match up my ends as I am doing this threading, and when I tie my slip knot, taking care that they do not slip apart from that lineup. That way, when it comes time to attach it to the apron rod, we would simply lift our beam back up. I like to put it on the furthest. If you have a brace that has multiple positions, I prefer the furthest back. And the apron rod is then, and this is a mistake I've seen people make, you have to make certain that you are pulling the apron rod up and around your back beam. Never go straight from the heddles to your back beam. You always have to have it parallel to the floor. And so then this apron rod should be able to reach within 3 to 4 inches of your heddles. And then you'll simply be untying your knot bundles and tying them then onto this apron rod. I typically put them over the rod like you see here in a group, and then I split them roughly in half and bring them up on either side. And we'll tie a double knot. I always start in the center so that my hands fit throughout this process. You might say, well, what's the difference if I start on my two ends to support the rod? It seems like a good idea. However, I have noticed that as I progress towards the center, there's less room for my hands to fit. And I've always found starting in the center and then alternating left and right until all of them are secured is the best approach. When tying onto your rod, make certain that you don't have knot tails of different lengths. One concern would be that if threads are not properly captured, and the other concern is if you are utilizing more of your warp length to make a knot over here versus over here. If you have allowed 7 inches for your knot tying, but you use 9 inches, well, your entire warp is going to have to be shortened to meet up to that 2-inch loss from that one bundle. They all march to the shortest drummer in this case. And so with that, I certainly welcome you to contact me if you have additional questions. I am available for video coaching sessions for a fee on your loom and your warps, and we can do the video call. So contact me at Tammy at TLDdesigns.com or at area code 630-963-9573. Thank you so much. I hope this helps.